Hello. Hi, I'm Pearl, and this is a little podcast about forgiveness and acceptance. There's a little bit on my blog as well about this, but I find it's much easier to talk directly to you. So the reason I want to talk about forgiveness and acceptance are that these are two very, very important concepts. And I find they're very useful day to day when it's just little things that have bothered you and you need to let them go. And also when you've got very, very big things or big problems or trouble with relationships where you want to let things go and you're finding it very difficult to do that. So I just want to talk about these concepts, forgiveness and acceptance. Now, very often they're kind of like talked about in the same way, and they're often seen as being kind of a little bit weak or easy. You know, I think sometimes, you'll just say very quickly to somebody, oh, I forgive you. Oh, that's okay, which is kind of like saying, I accept that. And sometimes we do, and sometimes those are words that we use, but we're not really, we're not really forgiving somebody, So sometimes it's kind of like, we just go, yeah, that's okay, it's okay. And actually what we really mean is it's not okay. We're not very happy with this, but we kind of go, yeah, it's fine. So that's one thing. But I wanted to look at the difference between the two things because I personally find it really, really useful when I'm trying to figure something out, when I'm trying to let go of something. What am I doing here? Am I actually trying to forgive something or someone, or am I accepting them? Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the differences between those things. And actually a lot of the misconceptions about what forgiveness and acceptance are. For example, a lot of people think when you forgive somebody, you're saying it's all right. That was okay, you can do it again, it's no big deal. And that's not true at all. And also, it's like, some people think if you're saying, if you forgive somebody, you have to sit down with them and you have to go face to face and, you have to give them another chance or you have to let them back in your life, and that's absolutely not true either. Very often forgiveness, actually the essence of forgiveness is it's what you do in your own heart. So forgiving somebody and letting go is something, it's kind of a private thing that you can do. And it's really about letting go of your resentment, letting go of anger, and really feeling that you've forgiven whatever that person has done. It's not about saying, it's something that you can do again. In my little blog, I said one of the people I think is really amazing when it comes to forgiveness. There was a lady and her son was killed in a street violence, and she forgave the murderer, and she just said, I forgive him. And everyone's like, oh, how could you forgive him? He said, well, I'm a Christian, this is my religion, and I forgive him. I'm not going to hold around this anger. Does that mean that he's not going to go to court? Does that mean no, of course he is, because that's our law and the law of the land. But she forgave him in her heart, and that's an incredibly strong and powerful person as far as I'm concerned. That to me is not like, a weak thing to do, to forgive somebody. And I think, when you are in a situation when you're really trying to forgive something, I think you understand that it's not necessarily a very easy thing to do. It's not a weak thing to do. To truly forgive someone comes from a place of great power, great personal power. But looking at acceptance, what is acceptance? And it might be, again, it doesn't mean to say when you accept something or you accept something about a person that you're then going to, start a new relationship with them. So, for example, if you're in a relationship with somebody who might have cheated on you, and you say, okay, I forgive you, and we're going to go back and we'll try and work on the relationship and da-da-da-da-da. Unfortunately, some people, again, see forgiveness as weakness, and they might think, okay, it's okay, she forgave me the first time, we're going to do it again, da-da-da. When you are in a relationship with somebody and you get to a point where you realise that they are always going to cheat, they're always, this is their nature, this is who they are right now, this is what they're going to, this person is set up to cheat on you. And when you accept that, sometimes it's when you can actually let go and say, okay, I accept that this is who you are, but we're not going to have a romantic relationship anymore. We might not even be friends anymore, I might not talk to you anymore, but I accept, once I've accepted this person as they are at the moment, I can make a decision. I talk in my blog actually about accepting my old job, when I was working there, and I really felt like it was a struggle every day, whether I was forgiving something, somebody else had done something, or forgiving myself sometimes for just being stressed, and being assertive as well, saying sometimes, no, this is not okay, and can we do this? And there was a morning I woke up and I just accepted that it wasn't going to get any better. This was the job. This is the way it's going to be. It's not going to get any better. It's not going to get any easier. And I went, okay, that's it. I'm leaving. Because once you accept certain things, it means you can let go. That's what it's about. So the other thing is when you accept, particularly your family, we often have a feeling like, I wish my family would accept me as I am. And yet we're quite happy to pick away at them and say, oh, but my brother does this, my sister does, if only they did this, if only they did that, everything would be wonderful. So when we can go to a place where we accept them as they are and stop saying if only or wishing they were different and just say, okay, that's who they are, that's the way they are, two really amazing things happen. One is that we feel happier, we feel more at peace, and we can also, usually live our lives in a better functioning way. For example, once you accept that somebody is always going to be late, you can kind of plan around it instead of constantly setting yourself up to be disappointed. Having said that, once you start to accept the people around you as they are, what's lovely is very often they're learning from you. They learn to accept you as you are, and you get to a place of acceptance and love and loving people as they are by taking the first step instead of waiting for them to take the first step. And, acceptance is very, very important. Now, I know there are books, whole books written about forgiveness, whole books written about acceptance. So I am just touching on these subjects. But when we come to accept ourselves as we are, that's hugely powerful as well. And I did a little podcast on body confidence and about accepting ourselves, loving ourselves, honouring the fact that we're perfect right here, right now. And that's very powerful because in a lot of places in our, global society, there seems to be a thing of saying, I will be happy when I lose 2 stone. I will be happy when I can fit into that dress. I will be happy when I have no cellulite, And if we accept ourselves as we are, number one, we can choose to be happy right here, right now. And that's pretty amazing, that we have that wonderful joy and love for ourselves. When we forgive ourselves and we accept ourselves, that's acceptance rather than forgiveness. We accept ourselves, and what happens then is often once we've actually let go of that, that thing that we must have to be happy, very often it happens quite naturally. We forget about that, concentrate on being happy, and it just happens automatically. I often say with my classes that we often think we have to be fit in order to be happy. And what I've discovered is that when you choose to be happy, the fitness comes very quickly along. It is strange that we have such a lot of stress in our lives. And when we can let go of things, we can accept things, and we come to peace and we let go of that stress, a lot of the problems that we have because of the stress disappear. And so by accepting things, we actually then release them. And forgiving ourselves, that's like when I mess up really badly, and I would say I'm not a late person. I'm usually very early or on time. Every so often something will happen and I will be late, and I will kick myself for that. And I say, look, I forgive myself. And funnily enough, last year, my first time in over 3 years, I had a situation where I forgot my music, and it was awful, and I was so upset. And everyone around me was so nice. They forgave me in a second, and it took me much longer to forgive myself. And actually my sister was the best person, because over Christmas we were talking about this, and I said, we're talking about the year, and I said, I can't believe I did that. I was still thinking about this. It was like 3-4 months later. She went, didn't Berto start Zumba because he forgot his music? And I went, yes, he did. And in that moment I was like, oh, that's okay, because sometimes the positive things don't necessarily come out of our mistakes straight away. Sometimes there aren't immediate positive things from our mistakes, but we forgive ourselves, we move on, and we take ourselves out of a place of saying, I must not make mistakes, I must never make a mistake. Because we hold ourselves to that, then it's hard to it's hard to be free to do amazing things if we're so rigid about the way that we do things. Okay, I'm not saying that I'm going to get my music ever again. That's okay. So forgiveness and acceptance. I don't know if I've like explained it. As I say, they're very, very big concepts, and this is just touching on them, just getting started. And as I say, sometimes when we're dealing with a very difficult situation, we have to work on both. I in a relationship I was going through, and I felt very angry at a person because of what I felt they had done to me, and I was going through a forgiveness process. And it was great because there was a lot of tools, a lot of things like letter writing, talking about our feelings, and really get in touch with the pain that I felt. And that's the other thing about forgiveness, is that sometimes we need to go into those feelings to release them and let them go. And I felt very, very angry, for a while. Like, a lot of anger came up. And as I got to the end of the forgiveness process and I was able to start forgiving this person, I also realised, and this is, I think, the big thing that for me anyway about resolving a lot of relationships, is I accepted that that person was doing their best, that they were always doing their best. And I think when we can accept that people are trying their best, it allows us then to completely, wholeheartedly forgive them. And I think that's very important. And sometimes we have to accept something before we can start forgiving it. For example, if you're in a relationship and you're trying very hard to make it work, it may be only when you get to the end and you actually accept that that relationship is over and you've tried your best and you can't go on anymore. Once it's over, that sometimes is the point where we can actually start to forgive. So they often work together, these two things, forgiveness and acceptance. And what I find personally is that by separating them out, I can look at, more clearly at what I'm trying to do in my own head and my own heart. Am I trying to accept this person for who they are, or am I trying to forgive something, And one of the things I always say is that everything can be forgiven, there is nothing that's unforgivable, because that's something, when we release it in our own hearts. But it might be that you think that some things are not acceptable, And again, those words, acceptance, acceptable, get used a lot. Particularly we use acceptance in terms of bereavement when you go through stages. So for example, we might start in denial, move through anger, bargaining, all these different stages, and we finally get to acceptance when we actually accept a loss. And it doesn't necessarily mean somebody who's died. It can be the loss, it can be a divorce, it could be losing a good friend, it could be moving or changing your job. So we often go through these stages. And it's funny in a way, because we see acceptance as being the end, but in a way it's also the beginning as well, because as soon as we're not denying something, we can be said to be in acceptance as well. So there is a certain amount of wordplay as well, like when we're talking about these things, thinking about these things. But it's definitely a very strong feeling, I feel, when I can forgive someone or I can accept something. And it's often when we accept something that we can really accept that it's over, or when we forgive somebody, it's a very difficult thing to forgive somebody sometimes. And once we get to the end of forgiving them, I think the last thing that in some cases, it's the last thing you want to do is then put yourself in a position where, you're going to put yourself in a position to be hurt by somebody again. And so, for example, once you've forgiven something of somebody for something, you don't necessarily have to say, oh yes, let's get together and I can sit down and I can tell you I've forgiven you. Because they might not appreciate it. They might not think that they've got anything to be forgiven for. And say, for example, if you have somebody who's constantly late and you go, I'm going to forgive you for all the times you left me hanging, and you meet them and they leave you hanging again, you've got to go back and start forgiving them again, which isn't great. So, as you can see, a lot of different thoughts and ideas about forgiveness and acceptance. There are some great books and great sections of books on those subjects. Marianne Williamson, Return to Love, it's very good on forgiveness. In terms of acceptance, I work with my life coach, and she's very hot on acceptance, and is very helpful. But again, many really, really good books if you're thinking about these, if you're struggling with the ideas and you want to dive into them deeper. And essentially, as I say in my blog, it's all about letting it go. Whatever we're doing, whether we're releasing forgiveness or acceptance, it's about letting go. It's about letting go, finding our own peace, feeling freedom from negative emotions, and being happy, really letting other people go and be happy so that we can be happy too. So it's very important, I think. Anyway, I hope this helps, and look forward to seeing you again soon. Okay, bye bye. Oh, I've got to get up now.